So I'm setting up, right, to photograph some wildlife and to kind of shoot this whole video about photographing wildlife. And I'm trying to think to myself, what kind of funny intro can we do? So I'll do a little intro before we roll the actual proper intro. So I'm trying to think to myself, what am I going to say? What am I going to say? And then a rat just ran across under my feet. And I reckon he's about 6 feet that way, in a bush. Brilliant. I don't know how many rats are there. And this is the best position in this whole place to do this video. So I'm going to shoot the video, possibly with an audience of I don't know how many rats. But I'll tell you what I do know. It's Tutorial Tuesday. Welcome back to Tutorial Tuesday, where every Tuesday, to be precise, you get a brand new, fresh photography tutorial. Now this week, we're going to be talking about wildlife photography. So I'm actually out and about, and there's all kinds of wildlife. I imagine you can probably hear it in the mic right now, all kinds of birds and stuff like that. So we're going to go through a bunch of tips on how to photograph wildlife. We're going to talk a little bit about gear as well, but we're going to focus on kind of how to do it, and also how you could probably do it with some of the lenses you already have. You don't necessarily have to have one of those huge lenses. So we're going to go through that. We're going to talk about a bunch of different stuff. Let's get straight into it. So the first tip I want to talk about is getting closer to your subject. So a lot of people think, when they think about wildlife photography, they think long lens, they think stuff like that. And there's a good reason for that. 600mm is going to get you nice results with wildlife. It's going to make it easier to get in nice and close for those nice shots of animals. But you don't need to be doing that. And actually getting closer to animals physically can yield better results. It can mean that you get nice, clear, crisp images. For example, if it's a little bit hazy, if it's a little bit humid, or whatever it is, you've got haze in the air, the further away you are, the more that light's got to travel and it's going to go through all that haze, and you're going to get less good shots. Whereas the closer you are, the less that's going to be a problem. Now, on a nice clear day, that's not really going to be an issue, but generally, the closer you are to something, the clearer it's going to be. Now, on top of that, 600mm lenses and stuff like that, they can be difficult to use to begin with. The first time you pick one up, they can be a little bit unwieldy because they're pretty big, they're pretty huge, and it can take quite a lot of time to get used to it. And if it's your first time shooting wildlife to begin with anyway, it's going to get a little bit difficult because there's a lot you're trying to take in all at once. Whereas if you go out to take photos of wildlife with something, even like a 70-200, or even like a 24-70, which I've definitely done before, with decent results, you can actually kind of concentrate on the wildlife photography itself, the composition of the shot. You can concentrate on stuff like that. And if you're around animals that are used to humans, then it's going to be easier to get close to them. Now, a great place to do something like this is exactly where I am right now. It's a local kind of park. There's all kinds of birds here. You know, you've got your ducks and your seagulls and your swans. Nothing against them, right? I love a good photo of a swan, just as much as the next person. But there's also things like herons here that are not particularly fussed by humans being around. So that can be a good opportunity to practice your photography with a shorter lens before going into maybe a longer lens and being able to stay slightly further away, and then maybe going out and being a bit more adventurous out in the wild. Okay, so let's talk about locations, because a lot of people, when it comes to wildlife photography, they think, okay, cool, I need to be out in Kenya, I need to be out in Africa, I need to be getting photos of lions and all that kind of stuff, or I need to be up in a mountain, I need to be getting photos of bears, I need to be getting photos of all kinds of stuff. And that's definitely not true. You can get photos of all kinds of really interesting animals, probably really close to where you live. It's probably easier than you think, because there's animals everywhere. Now, a really good place to start, like I mentioned earlier in the video, a great place to start with wildlife photography is a local park. I've got this great park. It's about probably no more than 1.5 miles from my house, which means I can come down here and I can take photos of all kinds of different birds. Now, like I said before, ducks, swans, seagulls, aplenty, right? There's loads of them. But there's herons, there's coots running around, there's moorhens, there's different things like that. And then I can venture out a little bit to different areas. But the key thing here is these birds and these animals, they're really used to people being around. They're really used to people being everywhere, so they don't have a problem. They're not running away. In fact, if anything, they're coming to me because they think I might have food. So it makes it really easy to get photos. They're not fussed at all about me being here with a really long lens and taking photos of them. Whereas out in the wild, you've got to be a bit more careful, and the animals are maybe going to get spooked and run away. Now, this is a great opportunity to practice composition, your actual technicalities of shutter speeds and stuff like that you want to get, especially if you're going for a longer lens, you know, that kind of experience of being able to see a bird and just reaching up to take your photograph, because that can be really hard. A 600mm lens, if you just suddenly point it at something, that could be really hard to get the shot. So that's a great way to practice. Now when you move on from there, any local woodland is definitely going to have animals. It might not seem like it, but if you can get just a little bit away from where people walk their dogs and where people are walking all the time, you are going to find deer. You are going to find different kinds of birds and stuff like that. There's loads of them around. Where I live, kind of down in the southeast, there's loads of wildlife reserves that are no more than an hour from where I live, where I'd almost be guaranteed to get some wildlife shots. But that's true over most of the country. There are wildlife reserves and there are areas where there are going to be wildlife pretty much everywhere. So it's worth researching that, because you will find that closer to home than you think, you'll be able to get some really nice shots. And to be honest, you don't need to be getting shots of lions and tigers and all that sort of stuff and bears to begin with. You know, you can definitely go out and get nice shots of deer and really cool birds of prey and stuff like that. And that kind of nicely leads us into something else I just wanted to talk about, which is patience. This is such a huge part of wildlife photography. When you're taking photos of birds or deer, anything, if you're not in your local park where they're just everywhere, swimming about all the time and it's no problem. If you're out in the woods, if you're out on a wildlife reserve, you're going to need to set up in a location, commit to a location, and then wait it out, and wait and kind of hope, I guess, that an animal is gonna enter your field of view and you're gonna be able to get the photo. Patience is so key to wildlife photography. Patience and a bit of luck, to be honest. Right place, right time comes into it all the time. But the more patient you are, the more lucky you're gonna get. Now that kind of leads us on to our next tip, which is about perspective and getting down on the same level as your subject. Now, if you get down to their level, you're going to give your photo a different kind of perspective. You're not going to be looking at it from kind of eye level of a human, which is a very standard kind of look to a photo. It makes it look like not a lot of effort's been put in. But if you get down to the level of a bird running across water, you know, or a squirrel about to bite into a nut, or anything, or a deer just looking up, and you've got the eye level. If you're at their eye level, oh, that can really make a shot. It gives you a different perspective. It allows you to see the world kind of through their perspective, and it just gives a bit more to the photo. You know, makes it a bit more compelling. And I think that's important. You know, you can have a technically great photo, perfectly exposed, capturing motion, all that sort of stuff, but I think it's the how compelling a photo is that ultimately makes it a great photo, or just technically it's fine. And that leads us on to kind of something else, which is about the actual photographs themselves. So it's not always just about the subject matter, you know, for what's going to make a great photo. It's not always about it being a lion or a tiger or something like that. It's just with all kinds of photography, it's about light. It's a lot about light, because that's going to make or break your photo. Now, good light in a photo is going to give you a nice, sharp, clear picture. It's going to give you kind of motion to the picture. It's going to play with your colours, your saturation, all kinds of stuff. And you can use light to your advantage. Now, the most sort of basic kind of light, and a lot of wildlife photography, especially in summer, like it right now, I'm under some trees, but over there where a lot of the birds are, the sun is just beating down. It's really high in the sky, so it's really harsh light. Now, there's not much you can do about that if you're shooting kind of in the day, but if you wait till later in the day, you're going to get the sun lower in the sky. You're going to get some nice side lighting. You might get some nice front lighting, or you can also use backlighting, which can look so good. There's different things you can do, so you can play around with that light. Now in the forest, that's not going to be so much of an issue, although you can try and move around till you get bits of light poking through the trees. And sometimes what I'll do is I'll set up in an area where the light is good. I'm not guaranteed that animals are going to be there, but I'd rather get the light really good than have a muddy, kind of dark or really harsh photo of an animal. That I don't need that. I don't need that at all. So I'd much rather have good light, and hopefully an animal will show up, you know, and hopefully something will happen. And so that kind of also leads us on to the final thing I wanted to talk about in this video, which was story and atmosphere in your photo. Now that can be something to do with light. You can create a lot of atmosphere in a photo by playing with the light. You know, backlit is going to give a very different kind of photo to side lit, which is also very different to kind of front on light. Sunset is a very different feel to it, to kind of midday, you know, especially if animals are starting to curl up with one another. That can be really nice. Getting a bit of story in there can really enhance your photo. So for example, a mother bird feeding its young, right? It's very, very different kind of photo emotionally and just everything really, compared to a photo just straight on of a bird. Now that straight on picture of a bird could be the most interesting bird in the world, could be the most awesome looking bird you've ever seen, and it might be a technically perfect photo, but a mother bird feeding its little young, that's so compelling. It's so compelling compared to a technically perfect photograph. And I think that's really, really important. A couple of animals curling up together as the sun is going down, that's like a very different feeling photograph. That's the main thing, I think. It gives a lot of feeling to the end result. It gives a lot of emotion to it. It puts emphasis on the story rather than the technicality of the photo. Headshots of animals look great. Technically, they're really nice and they can be a really nice photo. But having a bit more to it, having a bit of a story, or another way you could do it is include more of the environment around your subject. So rather than having a super close up on this animal, what if you pull back a little bit? Like we were talking about earlier about using shorter focal lengths. What if you pull back a bit and you have more of the environment? You know, an animal alone in the wilderness, that's a powerful image, as opposed to just a real close up of the animal's face. It being alone in the wilderness, or an animal by the side of its mother, that's a really powerful image. You know, surrounded by almost nothing. So I think that's really important. I think story and atmosphere, you know, they're things that I try and include in all kind of photos that I do. Not always successfully, but it's something that I try and include, and I think in wildlife it's really important because these are subjects, just like people that we're photographing, but they're not posing. So, you know, you can capture them in a moment of doing something, in a moment of kind of emotion and doing stuff, and I think that's important. I think that ends up with a much more compelling photograph. Now, I hope you found some of these tips helpful. If you do have any of your own, pop them down in the comments below. I love hearing the tips from you guys. We've had some great ones over the last few videos. Really, really good discussions as well. So I'd love to hear about them down there because there's loads. We've skimmed the surface of wildlife. I might even do another one in the near future about wildlife photography. There's so much to it. Now, if you liked the video, I'd love it if you gave it a thumbs up. That helps me out so much. My goodness, that helps me out, and I appreciate every single one of you who does that. Make sure to subscribe if you're new as well, because we've got new tutorials every Tuesday, hence the name, plus all kinds of other content as well. I'll see you in the next video, and as always, thanks for watching.